Hi, I'm Brad. 10 years ago, me and my brother Matt started a company called Urban Logic Games. And in that time, we've released absolutely nothing. So we've released nothing commercial, made no money at all, but we have learned a lot, and we think we'd like to mark the occasion anyway with this video showing you some of the stuff that we never really released before. So we're going to show you some old prototypes, a little bit of Flagship, and the current game we're working on, Alliance Peacefighter. So we're going to start with the mobile games. Okay, so this is a playthrough of Nebula. It's one of my first mobile games. And I'm not showing you this because it's good, it's not good. I'm showing you it because there's a lineage from this very sort of early stuff to Flagship. If you haven't heard of Flagship, and odds are you haven't, then that means nothing to you. But if you have, this might be interesting. And the idea was, let's take Battleship, but give the player information, so it wasn't just a sort of game of chance. So we can place the ship, and the enemy firing gives us information about where they might be. So they're in this area. There's a bit of a risk-reward sort of thing, where you've got to really start off shooting further away, because now they know that we're in this box. Oh, they've hit us. Okay, so I think you get 3 hits before you're dead, so we can only move horizontally and vertically. So let's just move here, actually. Okay, so they've moved. We don't want to... I've got a feeling they're around here somewhere, but I don't want to fire too close to my own ship. Yeah, they were up here somewhere. There we go. Okay, I can't remember why... Oh, if they travel through a... Okay. So if they travel through a previous shot, you get a reading. So we know that they're past this point, even though they could have technically have gone anywhere. Yeah, so I mean, the issue with this game is it's... I know how to play it because I made it, but it's very confusing for new players. Do spend a lot of the game guessing. There's often a very sort of wide area that the enemy could be, and as soon as they move, you lose the information. You have to remember roughly where they were, and then figure out where they could have moved to from there. I think it scratches a particular itch that I have. Right, okay, so if I move through shots, they're going to know roughly where I am, so I think I'm going to go here. Ah, okay, so the AI won. So at the time, I felt like I hit a wall with this particular prototype. I'd learned a lot. I was ready to try something a bit more adventurous as well, so I moved on. It's an interesting concept, and it's I would return to it, actually. We did a jam game, also called Nebula, a similar sort of concept. That's on itch.io. But this just didn't really come together. Okay, so this is Badlands. This is the game I started right after Nebula. I had a better understanding of how to actually program games at this point. I also used a lot of concept art from other games to mock this up, so you can see in the background there a bit of concept art from Deus Ex. And I think there's some art from a game called Star Conflict that I used for the avatars. Prevailing wisdom is to not do this, because games have launched with other people's artwork in them. So you're currently hiding in a debris field, and you're going to make your way to a nebula. That will make it much harder for the enemy to find you. As far as the writing goes, it's the first draft. I was just throwing things at the wall, so there's going to be a lot of stuff that doesn't really work. So this is the tutorial mission. It just teaches you how to move and how to shoot. But the basic idea is it's a stealth game in space. So the nebula hides you, going out into open space reveals your position, firing weapons, even when you're hidden, can give an indication of where you are, and it's the same for the enemy ships. I'm probably going to cut some of these traversals out when there's nothing going on. It's a little slow. So it's interesting that I've left this kind of fuzzy. I don't know if I like that now. It's not clear at all where you're going to stay hidden. I think I must not have liked the idea of an overlay. I think what I would do now is leave it like this until you click to move the ship and then show an overlay. So it's clear where you'll stay hidden and where you'll be exposed. Okay, so 2 of the ships have jumped away, conveniently leaving 1. So when you can't actually see the ships, the only thing that really gives their position away is their fire. So when they fire a projectile, you can see its trail, so you can kind of trace the trail back to its location. And when you hit a ship that's hidden by the nebula, you'll see the shield flare, and you can, if they're moving, you'll see the direction they're moving in. So this is pretty cool. This sort of cat and mouse. Well, I guess you're both kind of the cat. Now that I think about it, I remember now. I was basically making the Mutara Nebula from Wrath of Khan into a game. I think that's what I was trying to do here. I think there's stuff about this that works. I think the stealth mechanic is kind of cool. I think it's satisfying when you hit a hiding enemy ship. I think it was a little slow for a mobile game. So the later missions do introduce other things. There were active scanners with view cones, and if you fell into the view cone, it didn't matter how hidden you were by the nebula, the view cones would spot you. We tried sort of planetary missions as well. Mechanically not that different, but it was a change of environment. As with Nebula, interesting concept, I think. Execution, not quite there. And game development is kind of all about execution. It's not really enough just to have an idea. Unfortunately. There's something to this, I think. The first iteration of Flagship was basically a 3D version of this, but it was a difficult concept to pull off in 2D, and it was even harder in 3D. And that's one of the reasons Flagship became an RTS. It's got very little in common with this original prototype now. So Flagship is kind of the thread binding all this together, and we're not going to do a playthrough, but none of this really works if I don't talk about it a little bit. So I was working on Badlands, fully intending to finish and ship it, but a few things changed my mind about that. The first was that the design wasn't coming together. The second thing was that while app development was pretty accessible, by the time I was getting around to a release, visibility was getting a lot harder for indies. There was a lot of talk of needing 6-figure budgets for advertising. I didn't even have 3 figures. So I've been thinking about switching to PC development, and then the Oculus Rift Kickstart was announced, and that kind of sealed it for me. I was super excited about that. Really wanted to get into VR. So I made the switch and started working on Flagship. I started it in the Unity engine. I was simultaneously prototyping the game and learning Unity. Struggled for a bit with the original cat and mouse concept. Matt goes, "Why don't you make it an RTS?" I was like, yeah, okay. Worked on that for a bit longer. Started to add 4X elements, bit of an open world. Released a little teaser where you start in a bar, walked onto the ship. It was pretty cool. Got a little bit of attention. A few months later, we released the Space Pirates Attack teaser. That got a lot of attention, way more than we ever expected. That was a very weird few days for us. But the time had come to stop mucking about, narrow the focus a little bit, and start development in earnest. And also, whether we could use this momentum to run a Kickstarter and fund full-time development. So I want to say we spent about 3 months preparing that Kickstarter. We put a lot into it. I think we had a pretty good trailer, but the big downfall for us, I think, was that we never showed any gameplay. And that was by design. I didn't want to lock us into a particular path, but I mean, people understandably wanted to know what they were getting. There were a number of factors that led to us pulling the plug 3 weeks in that I'm not going to go into, but with 1 week to go, we still had half the money to make. Most Kickstarters have an uptick towards the end. We weren't going to bring in 45k in a week. There was no way. So Flagship, as I left it, is very much in flux. It's got a lot of rough edges. We've cut various things over the years to reduce the scope. There's always been this tension between the bridge simulation half and the RTS half that I never really resolved. And we'd fully moved away from the open world 4X style gameplay to a more linear, story-driven game with discrete missions. We'd also dropped the fully explorable ships. You spend most of your time on the command deck. We were hoping to add other areas too, but the idea was that you could play the entire game without leaving that deck. So each mission would start with a briefing, and then you would go to a pre-planning stage. And the idea was that for the first few minutes of a battle, you could have your ships exactly where you wanted them. Whether they're performing a direct attack, whether they're trying to draw ships away, whatever. Those opening volleys can dictate how the rest of the battle goes. And then once things get chaotic, you're just in it and making decisions on the fly. For a long time, the central map table was how you controlled everything. People had pretty strong opinions about that. Some people thought it was a little pointless being able to see outside when you were going to look at this map table the whole time. I came to agree with those people, so the map table's gone. Now there's a HUD that gets drawn over the view outside the windows, so there's no reason to look anywhere else. The UI was always a point of pain for me, very difficult to get right. I wanted it to be straightforward, but offer players the depth that you would expect from a bridge simulation. It was getting there, but the version you see in this video is clearly still very rough. I did add voice commands, that was cool, being able to say things like Group 1, attack Group 2, fire torpedoes. Most of the major actions you could take had a voice command. You didn't even need the UI. But I did rely on the Windows Speech API, so it only supported Windows, and if you hadn't trained it to your voice, it could be a little flaky. Life aboard ship between battles was very underdeveloped, and it was going to take a lot of work to get it to where I wanted it. NPCs didn't really do anything outside of scripted sequences. They would just kind of sit there. I had plans for scripted conversations to take place between missions to drive the story forward, and you could read emails and stuff like that. It was kind of like Mass Effect, but it just felt a little bit lifeless to me. So 7 years in, I start thinking about side projects because it's going to take at least 2 years to bring what I have to a state where it's shippable, and I would have to make a lot of trade-offs that I just wasn't sure I really wanted to make. So I tried two things. I tried a smaller capital ship game, which didn't really work, and I tried a space fighter game, which did work, and that's what I'm working on now. So I'm going to show you both of those. But as far as the future of Flagship, I do plan to circle back to it eventually. Alliance Peacefighter was built on the Flagship framework. I've been making improvements to that framework, and the idea is that I can then graft Flagship back onto the newer framework with the fresh eye and, hopefully figure out all the stuff I couldn't figure out before. As for when that will happen, that kind of depends on how Alliance Peacefighter does. There's a few ways this could play out, and I'm not going to know anything for sure until I finally shipped a game. So this is Destroyer. I was still pretty keen on the idea of making a capital ship game at this point, but it had to be much smaller in scope than Flagship was, and I wanted to try something mechanically different too. So the idea is you're on a smaller destroyer style ship. It's very submarine-like. It's not like Flagship. There's no windows. The battles in this game take place over a much smaller area of space, so we've got a holographic display showing the local area. We can see 3 enemy ships. They all have fixed patrol routes, and our job is to pick them all off one by one without being detected. So this little blue ship is us, or at least where we will be when we execute the plan that we're about to create. So to help us plan this mission, we have a time scrubber, so we can scrub backwards and forwards through the timeline and see where these ships are going to be at specific times. And each ship has a sensor sort of sphere. It's represented by a circle, but it's a sphere. As long as we stay outside those spheres, we remain undetected. Once we're inside the sphere, that ship has detected us, and then it's only a matter of time before the others know we're here too. The trick is that you have to kind of get inside the sphere before you fire, because if you fire from outside the sphere, they've got too long to react. They'll just launch countermeasures and fire back. So to get inside the spheres, you have to use the terrain, in this case the asteroids, to kind of stay hidden, because they can't scan through the asteroids. So we can just wait there until this ship passes by and then poke our heads up at the last minute. So after this playthrough, I noticed this far better position of attack here. From this position, you could fire just as the ship was coming over you. There's no chance I'd be able to react. So given that the game is all about spotting these opportunities, I'm a bit annoyed I missed this. So one of the things that this really needed that I didn't have time to build in was a wait command. So you kind of have to space the waypoints out so that you end up in the right spot at the right time. It's a little tricky. Another thing this probably needs is some indication of how far inside the sphere you need to be in order to hit the ship before they can react. We'll try firing a torpedo here. We won't know until we execute the plan if this ship will fire back or if we manage to destroy it. And therein lies the main flaw with this prototype, but we'll get to that. This second ship also comes within striking distance of this asteroid, so we're just going to come around and hide behind the other side while this ship moves over it. So with that torpedo placed, we can scrub through the timeline and sort of see how things would play out under ideal circumstances. But the enemy ships aren't reacting at this point. Okay, so I've cut a bit out here, but I've basically meandered around to another smaller asteroid. I'm going to try and poke up behind that one, hopefully surprise this last ship. I have a feeling I'm too far away from that one, but we'll see how it goes. And we'll place a final waypoint out of the system, just to wrap it up. And then we can click play to execute the plan, and watch it unfold in real time. Now it plays out pretty slowly, so I'm probably going to speed bits of this up. Torpedo away. Okay, we got that one, so we destroyed them before they could fire back or take any action, so that one worked. Fired another torpedo. I've just realised I'm actually pretty close to the edge of that detection sphere. Ah, okay, he's fired back. This is where the whole design gets a little sticky, because you can't take actions now. You can fire countermeasures, you can fire another torpedo, but you're doing it in real time, and you can't change your route at all, so you're kind of stuck with the route you picked. So it does kind of fall apart once an action fails. So, as you probably gathered, this wasn't really working, and I think it would have taken quite a long time to figure everything out. I think possible solutions would be to make the planning stage just the route. So you commit to a path through the asteroid field, and then once you've committed and it's playing out in real time, then you can fire torpedoes, fire countermeasures, maybe evasive manoeuvres, things like that. So you can react in real time. You'd still be stuck to the path you'd picked, which is a potential issue. But of all the prototypes, I think this is the one I'd most like to come back to eventually. At the time though, I just didn't want a load of problems to solve. I'd had my fill of that after 7 years, so it's time for something a bit more straightforward, and that's when I started the Space Fighter prototype, and that became Alliance Peacefighter, which I'm going to show you next. Okay, so this is Alliance Peacefighter. This is built on the same framework that I was building Flagship on. So we took all the stuff that was sort of simulating the star systems and running the ship AI and all that sort of stuff, and we ported it all to C#, cleaned it up, got rid of the stuff that wasn't really being used anymore, and built this game. It's a space sim, so it's a very established design. A lot of the problems were solved back in the 90s. And it obviously owes a huge debt to Wing Commander and the space sims that came after it. There's not a lot to figure out, really. The biggest issues for me have been trying to keep the missions interesting. That's hard to do in space sims without things getting too repetitive. And how do I tell the story? A big goal with this was to keep it economical, so we could actually finish the thing. And usually the most economical way to make a space sim is to not bother with the story, or to have the very threadbare story. I didn't want to do that. I play games for the stories. I know not everybody does that, but it was important to me that we had characters and a world that you felt pulled into. This playthrough will be of the first mission. I'm going to play it in flat screen mode because in VR the head movements can be a bit hard to watch in a video. Okay, so there's no voice acting in this game. All the conversations are via text boxes. There are little notches along the bottom so you can see how long a conversation is and where you are in it. Or you could just skip the whole thing if you want. If you want to break my heart. It's kind of got the tone of a Saturday morning cartoon, so it's not too dark really, and the humour's pretty mild. There's Gek, he's our comic relief. He's a little surprised that we've been attacked because the Alliance capital, where we currently are, never gets attacked. The Alliance is kind of like the main, sort of like the Federation in Star Trek. And there are other factions too. Gek is actually from another faction called the Scythed Empire, so he's on a sort of transfer program. Katumi is the ace pilot. Her and Gek are friends, but they rib each other a lot. There's a lot of banter. Yeah, and Gek talks like he's in a Jane Austen novel. Anyway, that's enough lore for now. Okay. Right, so I'm using the keyboard and mouse at the moment, but there's also full support for HOTAS joysticks, gamepad. Runs great on the Steam Deck. And in VR you can use motion controllers to actually grab the flight stick and throttle in the cockpit. And I'm using a tracked reticle, and you might notice the position of the reticle adjusts depending on the velocity of the target. So you don't need to lead the target, you just put the reticle straight over the thing you're firing at. There is a lead mode as well, so you get a lead indicator, that's in the options. I'll show that in a bit. Just slipping by him a little bit there, let's match the speed. There we go. So the original plan for this was to have planetary missions. In fact, you were going to start on the surface of this planet here, but I could never get the terrain where I wanted it to be, so you start in space and you stay in space. With the exception of one mission that takes place on a very small dwarf planet. It's just that scaling up to full-size planets it's a big challenge. Right, okay, we cleared that. So the fleet's tied up on the edge of the system. So we're on our own. 2 enemy carriers are inbound. We need to defend the orbital dock. Gek is being a cheeky monkey. Katumi is knocking him down a peg. And Bose is having a little joke here. He's a gruff guy, but he's not without a sense of humour. I just realised, I think I kind of based Bose's personality on Splinter. That's only just occurred to me. Okay, so we've got a couple of carriers warping in. Let's divert some power to weapons. So we've got power management on the left here. Shield management on the right. The shield management comes in handy for stuff like when you're taking on a gunship and you want more power to the forward shields. Most of the time you'll want it equalised, but there are times where you want to protect a certain side of your ship. Oh, incoming missile. Good launch countermeasures. There we go. The music here is by Matt. It's not quite as dynamic as it's going to be. Because his time's limited, he gives me ideas, various ideas in a sort of single track. What I've done is just basically chopped out bits I like and tried to make them sort of roughly looping. So it sounds a little rougher than it will do, and that's my fault, not Matt's. Once Matt's finalised everything, it'll sound amazing. But the idea is it'll dynamically switch, depending on what's happening. We're about to warp off to our next waypoint. So this borrows a lot of stuff from Flagship. This is actually a bit more advanced. In Flagship you can only warp in a straight line. In this you can warp in a curve, because there are times where you have to warp around planets. Let's switch to the lead indicator so you can see what that looks like. I've come to prefer the tracked indicator myself, but the lead indicator is how it's usually done in space sims. So I spent quite a lot of time on the flight model. I had to do it kind of intuitively, really. I couldn't find any sort of materials on what actually makes a good flight model. But I wanted it to feel like you were fully in control of the craft, like you're a dominant force in the combat arena. Your ship is very fast. I think it's faster than most space sims do it. This does have the side effect of making things feel a little smaller than they are. So you're zipping by huge capital ships very quickly. This isn't like Star Wars where it takes a minute to fly by a Star Destroyer. but it means you're basically swooping in and out of combat engagements pretty quickly. So these mid-mission conversations won't interrupt combat, they wait for a break in the fighting, and they're pretty rare anyway. Yep, laughing at my own jokes. It's worth noting that, with one minor exception, this is the only ship you fly. That's a scope thing. I had to keep the project lean. It's a good ship though. The enemy ships on this level are a little slow, and not very difficult to defeat, but you will face harder opponents as the game goes on. Right, that's it, we've done it. Scope's clear. So I tried to keep most of the sort of conversations brief. I know some people hate reading pages and pages of dialogue. So conversations are fairly snappy. I try and keep it to sort of the most important information. But the gist of that one was we aren't going home, we've been reassigned to this carrier. There are no manual landings in this game. Because the ship moves so quickly, it's just too fiddly. So once you get within a certain distance of the hangar bay, a tractor beam just pulls you in. So here's a little post-mission chit-chat with your teammates. We're currently in your quarters, so there's not really anywhere to go, but most of the time you'll be in the bar or a space a bit bigger than this. Okay, so that's mission 1 of Alliance Peacefighter. So Alliance Peacefighter was originally supposed to come out in the first quarter of 2022, and I didn't hit that milestone. And the problem with that was that there was something else coming out in 2022, and that was my baby boy, and he was bang on time. Okay, so this shoot was a little rushed, and I didn't realise till the edit that I hadn't really hit on all the points that I wanted to. So basically, my situation now is I'm a full-time dad, which I love, but it means I have way less time for game development. So I am still working on Alliance Peacefighter, but I can't set a release date at this time. It's really coming on though, and I'm so excited about it. And I can't say what the future holds as far as anything else, but there's a lot I want to do. And yeah, I do wish I'd achieved more in this last 10 years, but I feel good about where I'm at now and how far I've come, so yeah. So as for Matt, he's still involved, he's still part of the creative process, he's still making all the music, but he's a busy guy, he spins a lot of plates, he's a DJ, he's in like 4 bands, is that right? He's a professional videographer, entrepreneur, so you know, just squandering his talent. But yeah, he's around, he's behind the camera now actually. I thought I had...
do things, I just do things.
So if you've watched this far, thanks so much, we really appreciate it. And if you've been sort of following our progress since 2014 or whenever you dropped in, you know, thanks. We hope you enjoyed the video.